Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Eventide Patron-only stream. Hi there, I am the creator of Eventide and Pathfinder. I am Jason Bullman. Welcome to my this is the second stream already. We're already up to number 2. It's amazing. Today, what I'd like to talk to folks about is the upcoming Session 0. So last week, we spent some time talking about what this campaign was all about, why I was doing this, how it was coming together, what the kind of point was of the entire campaign. This week, what I'd like to do is chat about the upcoming Session 0. So part of this campaign is this playtest, right? I've got this introductory adventure coming up, Wolfram's Fate, and as part of that, I've assembled 2 groups of players to take part in this adventure, give me some feedback, let me know how things are going. And before those groups really get going, I've got to have a Session 0, right? So I've been working to assemble some of my Session 0 documents and stuff. I'm going to be sharing some of those with you here tonight. I'm going to talk about what my Session 0 is kind of all about. The first one of these is tomorrow night with the first group. The other one I'm still trying to schedule, but it's going to be very soon. So, busy times. Things are rolling forward. And frankly, that's why you also haven't seen a lot of movement on MinotaurGames.com the past couple days. Because I've been swamped. I've been trying to get this done. I've been trying to get all the character options finished. Once those options are finished, then I'll load them up to the site. But that's going to take me a little bit of time because I got to get to the players first. So that's where we're at. So the Session 0 is about to happen. Not everybody does a Session 0, but I actually think that, over the years I've started to realize that they are a pretty vital piece of your campaign planning. Gives everybody a chance to just kind of talk before the game actually happens, and chat about what the expectations are, what the game's going to be about, lets everybody sit down and make characters. Just gets a chance to everybody to get to know each other. Not everybody in these groups knows one another. So I kind of want them to be able to get a chance to chat with one another and kind of work out what characters they want to play together as a group so that they can be a more well-rounded group. I mean, if they want. What is Session 0 all about? So, I think there are about a number of very important things. The first and foremost for me and my group is about setting expectations, and some of it's really basic stuff. When are we playing? What time do we start? What time do we wrap? Where is the game going to be played? For us, it's all going to be played on a virtual tabletop, right? What is our basic table etiquette, right? What programs and what chat are we going to use and how's that going to work? So we're going to use, either Discord or Zoom, and we're going to use Roll20, I think. I'm still trying to learn the ins and outs of Foundry, so I'm not sure I'm going to move over to that just yet. But I have everything built for Roll20, so we'll probably start with Roll20 and maybe swap to Foundry at some point in the future. But basically, what I'm trying to get down is kind of what's the etiquette for which we play, right? One thing that I'm stressing, right, is because we're only playing for about 3 hours a week, once every 2 weeks with each group. Come ready to play. The game's going to start at 7, and we're going to go, right? If you want to sit around and chat about this week's, episode of the latest Disney show, you can do that. Just come early and do it, right? Because when we hit 7, we're going to get playing. And also kind of what's the cancellation policy. Both my groups have 5 players, so as long as we have at least 4, we're still going to go. Things like that. So, setting down expectations, just talking about that in a way that is deliberate and open. I find that a lot of groups just kind of have a bunch of assumptions when it comes to their table policies, and that can cause friction. Better to just get it out in the open. The next thing I go over with my group is kind of what are the resources they're expected to have to play. What do they need to have as a player? And for this game, it's pretty simple. They need the Pathfinder core rulebook, and they need the Eventide resources that I give them. That's kind of it, right? I'm not mandating 58 books or anything like that. This is pretty straightforward. They need the Eventide stuff that I'm going to give them and the core rulebook. they want to use the Advanced Player's Guide, that's an open option. Other books are open with permission. So, but other games might be different, right? They might have other resources you need at the table. Who knows? But for my games, that's all there's going to be. Next up, I kind of like to go through the setting, and this is really kind of looking at it from a 10,000 foot view, and not even about the specifics of the setting, but talking about it from outside of itself, so that everybody knows the kind of tenor and tone of the setting. As a matter of fact, here in the background here, I've made a PDF, and I'm going to release this PDF. The full PDF will go to Lords and Masters, but the survey, which comes at the end, I'm gonna open up to every patron supporter. But it's a bit of a straightforward little document, right? Covering the basics and resources and stuff like that. Here, let me pop it up in front of me just a sec. So, the entire point of this document is to give folks kind of a reference that they can come back to later, to look at and be like, oh yeah, that's what we discussed. That's how this is. I like to type these things out and give them to the players. That way they have them to work with in the future. And yes, you will all get a copy of this so that you can reference it. I mean, this is in reference to my group in specific, so, I wouldn't just hand this out to your group because it's specific to my group, but this is the kind of thing that I like. So, when it comes to the campaign, I like to talk about it from a, big, giant overview. And actually, while I'm sitting here thinking about it, I should probably open it up so that I can take a peek at it. So, in this case, for Eventide, I'm talking about how the world has less magic than they might be used to in a Pathfinder. And how they can't necessarily expect that when they get back to town, there's just going to be a cleric who can cure the disease they got. They may have to find other ways to cure it, or they might have to make a bunch of skill checks, right? It's not just about magic being readily available. Magic is leaving the world. That's an important theme of the game. And while the players are still going to have magic, right? They're special. They're just not going to find it as readily available outside of themselves. So, it also talks about where the adventure starts, so that they know where to look in the world information to find out more about the game. In this case, this adventure starts in the town of Wormbone and in the Icegar Valley, and honestly, the player's guide is aimed toward that, so they're not going to have a hard time finding what they need. But if you were using a bigger setting, right, or later on, once Eventide is a much bigger document, being like, hey, we're going to start in Varnathus, or we're going to start down in Crownbog, or something like that, tells the player, hey, go read that information. So, I find that giving players a bit of a setting clue early on kind of tells them, what to. Beyond that, I like to zero in from the setting itself to the campaign. And I'm not shy about this. I think some GMs like to keep everything really close to the vest and not kind of explain how or what the campaign is going to be about. They want it to be a complete mystery. I think you can do that while still signaling, hey, this is the type of campaign this is going to be. So for the campaign that we're about to go into, right, it includes some dungeon exploration, some city adventuring. It has some social challenges. It has some travel and journeys, and it has moral quandaries. It's not a total sandbox, but it's not a railroad either. There are points that are more linear storytelling, and there are points that are open up, and the players can make decisions and how they approach problems. Challenges in the world. So I like to just say that, right? I think some GMs are like, well, I don't want my players to know that, there's going to be dungeons. Surprise. But, saying up front, hey, this isn't a complete sandbox. You can't just wander away from the story and do whatever you want, because I'm not going to have stuff prepared for that. It's important to kind of be upfront about. This is also a good place to chat with the players about what the overall structure of the campaign is. Is it going to be open-ended? Are we just going to play and play and play and play and play until we get tired of it or the group disintegrates? Or is it a 3-month affair, right? And for what I'm planning for Wolfran's Fate, it itself is a contained story, but it is part of an open-ended campaign. Of course, I'm going to break it at every one of those big story points and say, hey, is everybody good continuing? If anybody wants to bow out or we want to swap people out, that's a good time to do it. And what's your policy for getting new players? For me, that's a, well, let's find someone, and it has to be a unanimous consent, right? I don't want anyone to have to play with someone they're comfortable with, and preferably, you know, I'd like folks to be friendly with one another and have a good time at the table. So, you know, good place to talk about those sorts of things. Now, beyond that, we get into themes, and this is actually one of the most important parts, I think, of the session 0, aside from character creation and kind of grouped in. Talking about the themes of the campaign is really kind of just a way to make sure that the story is going to be one that everyone finds, right? So you really kind of want to chat with them about what themes you expect to have as part of the story, you know, and what themes you're not going to touch. I like to take the kind of lines and veils approach to content. That's a very common safety tool that allows players to understand kind of where content lives, right? So there's content that's in the open. This is content that you will experience as part of the play. Your adventurers, you will be expected to deal with and face these sorts of things. That's out in the open. Then there's stuff that's behind a veil. It exists in the world, but we're not going to role play it at the table, right? I think we can all think of some pretty easy content that fits into that category. Guess what? People in Eventide have sex. We are not going to be role playing any of that at the table. It may happen. And we will say that happens behind the veil. It's occurring, but we're not going to roleplay. There's plenty of content that falls into that category, and I kind of break it down in this document. What is out in the open, what's behind a veil, and then the final category is what's across the line. What is something we're not doing? We're just not going to touch. That doesn't mean it doesn't necessarily happen in the world. I'm not so, you know, naive as to say that there isn't, you know, racism in the world, but I'm not going to make racism a part of this. We're not going to have a story about it. That's not what I'm trying to explain. That doesn't mean you can't. So for some groups, that is something they want and deal with, but not here. So, you know, being able to break down content, and this content will change over time, and it's not an absolute either, right? You know, one of the things that I'm doing as part of this is asking my players, what do you not want to see, right? If you're a big arachnophobe and you really don't want to face spiders, or if you do face spiders, you don't want them described in graphic detail, you know, that's something we can take into account, right? I think for all of you, those of you who watched me GM Knights of Everflame, there was a scene with spiders, actually driders, at one point in time in the middle of the adventure, and frankly, it really squicked out a number of the cast members. And when we took a break, I was like, "Is everyone cool?" Right? Because we can go back and I can make these a different monster if I have to. But they were like, "No, we're good. Just don't go overboard," you know. And I was like, "Okay, cool." You know, ideally, it's better to have those sorts of discussions in advance, which is why I'm doing these things right. You know, sometimes you don't know that you've wandered into something that makes someone uncomfortable, and that's why safety tools are important. That gets around to the final kind of piece of this, which is just having a means by which players can signal to the GM, "Hey, nah, let's not do this. Let's not go down this road." And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I know that some people find that a bit of a challenge in their storytelling and narrative design. I don't. I'm much more willing to retcon a thing out of a story that's causing a problem for somebody and just move along. You know, it's not that hard to figure out a different way to take a thing. Oh, you don't like giant spiders? Cool. It's a giant acid spitting beetle. Ta-da! Done. Its stats are the same. It has an acid spray that I'll make up on the fly. You know, I don't really think that's all that challenging to do, and if it adds to the comfort and happiness of everyone at the table, that makes for better storytelling, and that's kind of what we're here. So that kind of covers themes. I think for me that's a very important part of the discussion, although not necessarily a lengthy one during the session 0. I like to be able to give folks there's some great checklists and things like that out there about content. I like to be able to give that to them and let them fill it out and send it back to me anonymously, and just be like, "Yep, I've got a bunch of these. There's some content in here I probably don't want to include. No worries, no problem. I'll just take that into it." And by the way, some of this is baseline for the Eventide setting as well, right? So, you know, just looking at it, things that could be part of play: alcohol use, betrayal, blood, dead bodies, disease, drug use, light gore, natural disasters, romance, vermin, violence, violent animals. All those things are going to be things you experience. There's plenty of things that you may hear about that are part of the setting, but not something that's going to be actively part of the role-playing story. Things like abuse, addiction, explicit sexuality, excessive gore, self-harm, and torture. Not to say these things don't exist. They do. They might even be mentioned, but they're never going to be the central part of the story. And then you get into things that are just like, nope, we're not doing that. Child endangerment, racism, serial murder, sexism, sexual assault, slavery. I'm not interested in telling stories that involve those concepts. I think those hit way too close to home for some folks, and frankly, it can make a table uncomfortable. And the story just not very fun. It's not for the same for every group, but for me, that's where the line. So, there's that. Now, we're going to get through all that, and then ultimately, the big thing that we want to get around to is creating characters. Right. So, you're going to want to sit around and chat about, kind of what everyone expects to see from the table, how they expect things to work out. But it all comes down eventually to creating a group of characters, getting together and having a fun adventures. So, getting the players to talk about what they want to see out of the group, what they want to see out of their characters. That's kind of the final step of the session 0. And ultimately, as GM, this kind of isn't something you get to control. You can have suggestions. You can obviously say, hey, the following content is available. The following content is not available. In my document, I have an entire extensive thing that talks about this is how we're creating characters, right? We're going to follow the standard rules from the Pathfinder core rulebook. We are going to, we're not going to roll statistics. We are going to use the standard boost buying of statistics. And, so that is how we're going to make characters. As far as what content you can use anything from the core rulebook. You can use anything from the Eventide Player's Guide, of which there's a fair amount of content. And, the Advanced Player's Guide is an open source that anyone can use without having to ask. Beyond that, I just ask them to check with me. That way I don't end up with somebody picking and pulling from 8 different sources. Generally speaking, my preferred approach to character creation is to say to the player, listen, players, the core rulebook, the Advanced Player's Guide, these are open sources to you. You may have another source, right? But I don't want you to have 5 other sources, right? Let's keep it narrow, at least to start. You'll get plenty of other stuff as we go along and play, but you're not going to get all of it right. So, this is also where you talk about, if you're not playing at first level, kind of how to deal with loot and treasure and stuff like that. This is a campaign at first level, so it's all pretty standard on that front. And of course, I also mentioned some of the special rules for Eventide, right? Eventide has a few special rules for character creation. The first of which is some of the rarities are different, right? We've already talked about this some. Gnomes and druids are out. They're both rare. But gloamlings and penumbras are in. There's some other content that is out as well, that just doesn't fit into the most of that has to deal with primal magic. It's all pretty self-explanatory, but yeah, some of that is. So on the whole, I want the players to kind of get together and chat about, what characters they want to play, chat about what, classes they're interested in, what ancestor they want to be in. And I take a pretty light hand on this. I encourage them to have a diverse group with a lot of different skills and a lot of different classes. But frankly, with 5 players, if there's a double up on class, I think the game, especially Pathfinder 2nd Edition, can handle that quite well. The game engine is one that, frankly, is pretty forgiving. And within most classes, you can have 2 very different characters of the same class filling some different roles at the table, right? If you think about a war priest versus a cloistered cleric, right? You've got 2 pretty different characters there. They're both casting a lot of spells. You're going to have a lot of divine magic on in your group. But one is going to be much more about fighting, and the other one's going to be a lot more about spellcasting. So, and may actually then take more kind of offensive divine spells, whereas the war priest is mostly going to take buffs. So you might end up with 2 very divergent characters, both of the same. I find that throughout Pathfinder 2nd Edition, there's a lot of classes that allow for that pretty well. And then finally we get to the survey. Now, the survey for me is really a lot of fun. I think, some GMs like to open it up and ask their players, hey, can you, give me an essay about your character? And I think we all know the tropes, right? You're going to get one player who gives you, 2 sentences. You're going to get a couple players that give you a handful of paragraphs. And then you're going to get one player who gives you 14 pages of 8-point single-spaced text, right? And you're going to get this wide spectrum. What I like to do is give a survey and say, hey, there's a whole bunch of questions in here. I want you to give me a couple sentences. It encourages the players who go light to give you a little more, and it kind of reins in the character who wants to give you the novel of their character. Because frankly, as GM, once you're involved in play, right, you want to be able to harvest things from those backstories. You want to be able to pull from them to help kind of enrich your story. That's going to be something we're going to explore a lot once we get into the campaign itself. I'm going to be providing all the patrons with my adventure kind of scripts. They're actually going to be laid out a lot like, this. So you can even kind of see the format coming together there. It's part 1, this is session 0. The first part you will get will be part 1, session 1 of Wolfran's Fate. And you will be getting these scripts on a weekly basis. But in my wrap-ups and my planning sessions, I'm also going to talk about the groups and how I think they're going to approach these, and how I might modify the adventure to fit those groups. The point of this is to kind of give you a sense of how you can twist and turn an adventure to kind of make it fit your group. I realize these are skills that a lot of people probably already have, but I'm going to show you how I do it. So, the character survey kind of gives you a lot of those details to work with. And they are pretty vital. So I divide the character survey up into 2 parts. Hold on just a sec. Sorry about that. I needed to wet my whistle. Okay. So I divide the character survey up into 2 components. The first one I call common questions. And these are questions I want everyone to answer. There's only 8 of them. They're pretty straightforward, but they're there to kind of give me a baseline of information. So, they are things like, tell me about your childhood and your family growing up. How does it tie into your background? Just give me a couple sentences about your childhood and your background and how that all came together. What I'm looking for is the story of you, right? What made you leave the ordinary life behind and become an adventurer? Some of you may have gotten a preview of this. I posted this on Twitter last week. Why did you leave that comfortable life behind and go become a reckless, dangerous adventurer? Right? One thing that I stress in Eventide is that being an adventurer is not a career that most people think is the sane, safe choice, right? It is reckless and dangerous, and you are risking your life on a regular basis for a chance at a handful of coins, and that's not something most people think is a great idea. So why are you doing it? What from your old life is likely to come back to haunt you? This is me just asking the player to give me something to throw at them, right? I'm pretty naked and in their face about it. What do you want me to throw at you later? Do you have a childhood bully who's going to come back to haunt you? Do you have a scorned lover who's out for vengeance? Do you have a business partner who is trying to rob you, right? What's in your backstory that might come back to haunt you? Maybe it's something really minor, just like you lost a pet, right? And maybe it'll come back one day. You're constantly on the lookout for it. It's long-lived, so it could still be alive, but you haven't seen it, right? It doesn't have to be anything gigantic. As a matter of fact, some of the small ones can also be really poignant. Question 4. Is there anything you carry with you as a memento from those early years? Do you have something personal on you? Not some people might go the obvious route and be like, my father's sword, right? And that's fine. But it could be something as simple as, I have a hair ribbon from, this spring festival from when I was a child, right before, our village was, consumed by the Zankar Imperium and we all had to flee. and I haven't seen my family since, but I still have that ribbon, right? Could just be a little thing. Doesn't have to be something huge. Doesn't have to be something pivotal to your entire character concept. I just kind of want to know what's important to you. And I kind of, you know, this is just me engaging with the player to be like, what is important to this character? Crawl inside their skin and tell me what's important to them. Next one's pretty straightforward. Who taught you the skills you use as an adventurer? Right? How'd you learn to do what you do? You know, did you have a mentor? Did you learn it on your own? Were you part of did you join a militia? Were you part of a thieves guild? You know, did you study in Varnathis? Did you, you know, were you actually trained in one of the Zankar Penumbrist academies and you fled? What's your story? How'd you learn to be an adventurer? The next one's a fun question. Why are you in Wormbone, and why are you desperate to find a way to make some coin? This speaks to the start of the adventure, right? And this is, I think, no matter what your adventure is, asking the players a question that ties directly into the start of the adventure is really important. Why are you doing this, right? You know, I ran a campaign a few years back, and the main question I asked everyone was, how do you know this NPC called Nathar? And, you know, explain your relationship to him and why he's important to you. An aging scholar in town, why does he matter to you, right? Why is this person someone that you care about? This one is, why are you in Wormbone trying to earn some money? Tell me why. You know, that is the case, because that is the situation at the start of the adventure, is that all of the player characters are desperate for coin and are trying to earn some money. Why? If they have a handful of coin in their pocket, why do they need more? And what are they willing to do? Next is pretty straightforward. List 3 words that describe your character's attitude and personality. This is just kind of me saying, hey, what type of character are you going to be at the table? Right? You know, just give me 3 words, right? Because I often find that I don't like to ask players to go much deeper than that, because frankly, until a player has had a chance to play a character, oftentimes some of these things don't quite gel yet. I don't know about the rest of you, but when I design a character and I sit down to play that character isn't fully formed, isn't real, until I've had a few sessions to play the character. And sometimes I'll have, you know, personality traits or affectations that I'll just drop. Other times I'll find one that fits better and I'll just kind of apply it and be like, oh yeah, I've always been like this, right? Because it feels more natural at the table and is a better fit for the group dynamic. You know, I think that is giving players the flexibility that's like, listen, your character, your backstory, you should probably lock down. Even that has some flexibility, but your personality can kind of still be amorphous. Give me a couple words to tell me where you're thinking about going, but don't worry about it. You're going to have flexibility. And then the last question is just describe what your character looks like. Give me a description. What do you look like? You know, something that I can make sure to have on hand if I need to describe your character to, say, the other characters before you've actually met. You know, I like to get people to think about character look. So those are the common questions. There's 8 of them. You know, I don't think those are too onerous. Most of those are pretty straightforward. They're the sort of thing that you would expect someone to fill out in a character backstory. But I like to go a little bit further than that. And that gets me to the inspirational question. Now, I've written like 41 of these. They're divided up into groups. And the entire point here is there's 40 of these questions. Answer maybe 2 or 3 of them. That's it. You don't have to answer 10 of them, right? As a matter of fact, your life would be far too eventful if you answered 10 of them. So instead, you know, it's answer, you know, 2 or 3 of these questions. Odds are no 2 people in the group are going to answer the same question. And as GM, you can kind of look through all their answers. And if someone has answered the same question, you can kind of be like, hey, why don't you pick a different question for this spot? Or kind of point them at a similar question that's a different kind of... That way you don't have people kind of with same bits of backstory. I have done this also where it's a random roll, or in fact, I'm kind of working on an RPG where you deal cards out from a deck of cards, and those determine some of the questions that get asked. That way they're can't be two of the same question. But in this case, there's 41 you could randomly roll, but I actually think it's better to just tell the players, hey, why don't you pick a couple of these? So why don't I give you some examples? As I said, they're divided up into 8 categories. There's combat, criminal, exploration, personal, religion, social, spellcasting, and world-specific. So I'll give you one sample from each, just to give you a sense of kind of what's going on here. So combat. Let's see. Somewhere on your armor, you display a trophy from a terrifying creature, but you didn't kill it. Why do you tell people that you did? What I'm trying to do is get them to explore their character from a different angle. Reach out and go, why is this character got these weird quirks or these weird affectations? Why do they have these mannerisms? What is it about this character that's interesting? This is very similar to the game Dread, if anyone's ever played that. They kind of give you character surveys at the beginning, and oftentimes the surveys have some questions in them that are kind of wild and meant to throw you for a loop. Same thing here, right? I'm trying to ask you questions that make you think, and make you think outside of kind of the standard fantasy narrative of, well, I grew up a farm boy, and then I apprenticed as a blacksmith, but I decided instead to go out and be an adventurer. Cool, you can have that. But why are you carrying around this trophy from this creature you didn't kill and telling everyone you did? Why are you boasting? What's up with that? What does that say about your character? Right. All right. So, criminal. You commit a specific petty crime all of the time. What is it, and why hasn't it gotten you in trouble yet? So, something small, something innocuous. Why do you do it? You tag places, right? You carve your initial into the benches and tables of inns and taverns. Why? Just a thing you do. Hasn't gotten you in trouble yet because it's a minor thing. Oh, you steal silverware. Okay. Oh yeah, no, you have a tendency to scratch the door of every business you've been in with a small symbol. Right? Oh yeah, you insult the militiamen, right? Whatever it is, you've got something small and relatively innocuous that you do on a regular basis. Exploration. Let's see. There is a mark on your body that appeared after you ventured into an eerie place. Describe the location and the mark that is on your body. So little things, right? I'm just trying to get folks to kind of give me more about their character. Personal. Due to some grave injustice, you have sworn vengeance against an individual. They are still trying to evade you. Who are they and what did they do? Religious questions. Zealots of a faith have hounded you in the past for your transgressions against their beliefs. What did you do, and whom did you anger? Right? Some of these are pretty straightforward, pretty easy to answer. Others are a bit trickier, right? Your family, this is another religious one. Your family keeps up with an old deity that no one worships anymore. Describe the forgotten faith. I'm asking the player, hey, invent a weird forgotten faith that exists in this world, or at least did exist in this world. What is it? What's its deal? The world of Eventide only has 5 deities. It used to have more. What happened to those? Who are they? What was their deal? And why have they gone silent? That's a central question in the campaign. But if you worship some old forgotten deity and you have some weird old rusted holy symbol, right? Weird. But it's interesting. It certainly gives the GM some hooks to play with in the future. Maybe you uncover a shrine, with ancient holy texts. Maybe there's some clue that you can. That gives the GM something. And for those of you who have been paying attention, yeah, the Eventide Twitter account this week has been going through the 5 deities, kind of talking about each one of the deities in turn, going through. And kind of giving some lore on them. A lot of that lore you can already find on the Minotaur Games website. Not all of it. All right. Social questions. You have a family, possibly including a child somewhere nearby. Tell me about them and what you do to support them. I like this idea of someone who actually has a family, but they're out doing adventuring, right? They got a wife and kids or a husband and kids. But they're out adventuring. They just got to make sure they're home for the weekends, right? That's kind of fun. Could be really interesting. Could set up some interesting role playing opportunities. And of course the evil GM in me is like, it's like, oh, you have a spouse that I can endanger, right? I mean, I'm not going to endanger the kids, but the spouse is fair game. There are things that you can do to kind of make the game more interesting, and it doesn't have to be a danger either, right? They could just get caught up in the mess that you were involved in, right? If you get hounded out of town, what happens to your family? Do they get hounded out too? Do they have to move somewhere else because you pissed off the magistrate? That would be pretty lousy. I see that there is a lot of folks in chat talking about the various things that they might steal. Salt and pepper stolen from every tavern you visit. Yeah, you could end up with an awful lot of salt and pepper. Stealing pastries, yeah, that'd be fun. Lots of things you could do. Yeah, and it does remind me of a certain king who likes muffins, for those of you who have been watching my Twitch for years. All right. Spellcasting questions. Some of these tie very specifically into an aspect of the game that I haven't talked about. So, spellcasting in this world is actually very difficult, because in most places, the kind of tapestry of magic is in tatters. And as such, casting spells is really difficult. So in some of these places, right, you can cast a spell, but you lose a slot of the same level when you, right? So you basically have to throw more magic energy into it to get the spell to go. But there are these things called links. And a link allows you to cast spells as if the magic level was one step higher, right? So in most cases, that means it's going to allow you, if you have a link, it's going to allow you to cast spells normal, right? You can cast spells, nothing bad happens. But some of the questions speak to that, right? So your link, the item that helps you cast spells, was a gift from a close mentor. What happened to them, and what did they give to you? So describe the link and what happened to your mentor. They're not around anymore. What happened to them? So yeah. And then there's a handful of world-specific ones. Each one of these has 5, except for the world-specific one that has 6. And some of these are just kind of looking at the world itself and kind of talking about it. So, a close relative died trying to explore a local legend in the Icescar Valley. Who were they, and what were they trying to find or uncover? So we've got this Icescar Valley Gazetteer. Look through it, tell me what, they were trying to explore. Maybe they were going up to Hook Peak and they died in the ascent. Maybe they went up into the Blue Claw Mountains trying to go and find some trinkets from Rhyme Shield and never came back, right? Plenty of things to explore. Maybe they went to the ruins of Summerglen. The ruins of Summerglen. Bad. So yeah, that's what it is. So here's what's going to happen. That's the survey. That's the start to the end of the survey, and I'm going to ask all my players to fill out those 8 key questions and then a handful of the bonus questions as well. Their choice, right? They get to kind of mix and match. They can answer 1, they can answer 2, they can answer up to 3. I'm fine with that. And they can use that then to kind of round out their character, and that combined with their character sheet is going to give me what I need to get ready to get playing. So for all of you, the way this is going to work is my entire Session 0 document, is going to be up for Masters and Lords here later up this week. But I'm going to make the survey available to everybody, to scholars and up. So everyone will have the survey. You can use that in your own games very easily. The Session 0 is really kind of specific to my games, but I want you to be able to see it. So I'll be throwing that up here soon. Well, so there we go. That's my Session 0. The first one of these is tomorrow night. I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping that within the next week or so, I'm going to start having a group come together. I'm going to start being able to see characters. It's going to be exciting. I got to get a lot of rules content done for them. I just got a handful of things for. I haven't done Cursor, but I have most of the penumbras built, at least enough for us to get started. And there's a whole bunch of other feats and features that and all the Destiny stuff. So there's a bunch of really fun stuff for them to dig into with them to figure out what they're going to play. Now, I see that it's about 7:41 here. I think, we've still got a handful of minutes here. So if folks want to chat, I'd be more than happy to do so. Just type your questions into the YouTube chat here, and we can chat about Session 0. I'd love to keep this focused on Session 0 questions, if at all possible, and I'll answer what I can. I do want to talk about our next stream. The next stream for patron supporters is going to be this Saturday. But it is for Lords and Masters up. Scholars aren't in this one. And if in this one, we're going to look at the cosmology of the Eventide setting. A lot of folks have expressed some interest in that. And I'm going to dig into the cosmology of Eventide a bit and chat a bit about it. At least what I know so far. Because it's not all spelled out, but it is coming together, and I have like a cosmological diagram and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to do that this Saturday. That's going to be from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. Right back here on YouTube. The link will be posted in the Patreon for supporters of that Master and Lord. $10. So, and if you missed it, obviously it'll still be available to you afterward, so you'll be able to catch it. No worries. As with all the videos, they'll remain available to everyone going. So for the folks watching here tonight, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. We can chat about those. I'm really excited about the Session 0. I think it's a good chance to get everyone together. And in the case of the group that's meeting tomorrow, some of them are going to be meeting for the first time. I know they're going to get along just great. I'm not worried about it. But it is the first chance for them to kind of get together and chat about the game. I got a question here. Is the starting gear universal for Session 0? Do you mean starting gear for player characters, or you mean starting gear for the players? I think asking the players to have dice and rulebooks is pretty... I think starting gear for adventurers, I kind of let them spend their money however they want, within reason, right? They're only going to get 15 gold, which isn't going to take them too far. Yeah. So I got a question about character generation in that there's a question about firearms. Are firearms part of the Eventide setting? They are. In fact, goblins are the ones who kind of are mostly focused on black powder and gear and steam technology. Crown Bog itself is kind of a teetering, smoke-belching mess of a town that's fallen down and burned and fell into the swamp multiple times. I think this is the 5th, maybe the 6th. The goblins don't even know how many times Crown Bog has lit on fire and fallen into the swamp. But, they keep rebuilding. It's a nice spot. It's got a good view. So, are firearms part of the world? Yes. How common are they? Not very. They're not so common that, like Zankar doesn't use them in mass scale. In fact, most people consider them kind of frightening goblin claptraps that, could get them killed. They're seen as dangerous devices that goblins use, and, they'll never catch on. So firearms are a part of the setting. That doesn't mean other characters can't have them. If you want to play a dwarven, gunslinger or something, you can. Adventurers are the special ones, so they get to kind of break those rules. But I don't think you'll find, gunsmiths up in the north, right? They just won't be. So getting back to the starting gear, for player characters, yeah, I mean, I kind of keep them to the core rulebook for the most part. If folks want to buy one or two small, like elixirs of health or something like that, minor alchemical, salves and elixirs and stuff, I'm okay with that. Eventide does feature, one of the things that I've added to the game is poultices. Poultices work like slow-acting alchemical healing tools. So you can't be benefiting from more than one at a time, and so it'll be yeah, this heals you for a d6 plus 1 hit points, but it does so at 1 every 10 minutes. So they're just slow. If you're not in combat, they're great. They're also really cheap. So, and there's even some ways for alchemists to make large batches of using their use reagent. They can make even one. So those are some ways to do healing, right? Because as I said, magical healing isn't as common. You can't just go up to the local cleric and be like, hey, heal me. I'll pay you, right? Because half the times you'll get to the local cleric and they'll be like, I don't cast spells, but I can use medicine on you, right? You know, and that's what they'll do. And they'll be happy to charge you for it. But they won't have spells to cast necessarily. That doesn't mean there aren't any. It's just that they are not as common. How do I handle TPKs? Well, I don't know that it's something I'd really talk about in a session 0. One thing I do mention in the session 0 is that if you're not present at the table, your character will participate in the adventure. They will continue if they have to. They will be run by the GM, and they won't be put in any mortal danger. Unless the entire party is. So they don't get to survive if the party TPKs just because the player wasn't there. The party TPKs, they TPK with everybody else. So, you know, how do I handle TPKs? Delicately, right? I mean, I don't ever want to see a TPK. They do happen. And, you know, that's just kind of a fact of life when you're running a game with dice. That sometimes the dice go bad and people die. What hero points are for, right? Hero points are a big, important factor in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Whenever I hear of a table that doesn't use them, I'm like, no, we designed the game for you to use them. The math is tight. Use the hero points. They are not going to break your game. It's not playing on easy mode to have hero points. It's playing on the normal mode. Playing without them is playing on hard mode. So, one question is, are the players going to meet at the exploration lottery, or are they going as an excavation team that have worked together? I think that depends on the group. They can know each other. They don't have to. The adventure has a hook that forces the players together, right? If you were here last week, the initial start of the adventure is Wolfran's Tower is finally opened. It's been sealed for hundreds of years, and it's finally open. And the town has decided to send in teams of explorers, but they don't want everyone rushing in at the same time. So they're assembling them in groups and letting them go in together, kind of to work together, hopefully not to die, because no one knows what's in this tower. And the players get bundled together, right? Either by random chance or because that's what they've chose to do, right? So, yeah, will the adventure start in the city? Yes, as a matter of fact, it starts in Wormbone, in front of Wolfran's Tower, right? I'm a big fan of kind of starting, you know, in media res, right? In the middle of an action scene, if I can. This doesn't quite start in the middle of an action scene, but it does start very close to one. It starts, you know, on the precipice of adventure. Because I actually think it's really important when you kick off a story or when you kick off a session, kind of get people focused, get people engaged right away. It's not always possible, but when it is something to strive for, right? You know, getting players engaged right away and not starting out with a role-playing encounter that only one player is really primed to participate in. That's a good way to make everybody else kind of not pay attention for the first 15 minutes of the adventure or the story, and that's no way to start an adventure. So this is going to be starting kind of right on the edge of adventure and kind of diving right in. Some folks have asked how long it takes for these videos to go up. This video will be up the moment it is done. So the moment we are done here, you can hit play on this and it'll replay. This isn't like Twitch where there's a delay on VOD. Here on YouTube, it's instantaneous. So the live videos are available the moment we are done with. Have I designed adventure-specific backgrounds kind of like Paizo does for their APs? Funny, you should mention that, because I was one of the first people to do that in 2nd edition. That's actually a bigger holdover back from the player's guides from 1st edition, which had adventure-specific traits. This doesn't have adventure-specific backgrounds, but it does have location-specific backgrounds. And those are almost going to be the same thing. So what's going on is the player's guide has backgrounds in it that are tied specifically to the Icescar Valley, to Wormbone, to the various districts of Wormbone. Those are pretty critical. Those are already up on MinotaurGames.com, and players who take them will find that later on in the story, they may have elements of their background come in play. That something about their background may come and be a part of the story. So if you're interested in those, you can find those right now on MinotaurGames.com. All right. I think that is just about gonna do it here. So I did get a question: am I going to stream any of these play sessions? No. I have assembled these groups of good friends. They're not professional streamers. They are friends and acquaintances of mine, and we are going to play and have a good time. And frankly, I want to get their honest, straightforward feedback, not their performances. I do love streaming games, but streaming game is very different than what I'm trying to accomplish here, which is kind of playtesting the game. And the best way to playtest the game is to have it play natural and have it play normal. I'm not saying folks can't play natural and normal on a stream, but it takes a while to get there, and I'm not going to ask them to. And not all of them are really streamers. So, it's best to just kind of keep these to me. But I'm going to share with you a lot about what happens at those tables. I'm going to share anecdotes and stories. I'm going to talk about them from their character names only. I'm not going to talk about them using player names, but we'll talk about them from their character names, and we'll get to know them. I may do entire streams where we just kind of talk about the characters in each one of the group and kind of get a good way get to know them. But that is for a future stream. Speaking of which, I think we are just about at a wrap here today. Folks, I want to invite you, those of you who are of the Eventide Lord and Master level, I want to invite you to come back this Saturday at 3 p.m., where we're going to be diving into some of the secrets and mysteries and GM secrets of the realm of Eventide. We're going to start off by taking a look at the planar cosmology and delving into kind of what that all means and what's going on with that, because it's weird and there are things that happen, and we're going to talk about that this Saturday. That's at 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. Pacific time. Right back here on YouTube, there'll be a link posted in Patreon. That's all I have here today, folks. I want to thank you all for watching. We will see you next Tuesday for more chats. We'll be able to talk about the first session 0 and where things are kind of heading. I'm looking forward to it. We will see you then, folks. Take care. We'll see you next time.